Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Bishop Bryan Ouellette with the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church, coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains on this August 17th, 2018. This is Vestiges of Christianity. And today we've got a difficult topic, challenging topic. A disturbing one, but it is one that must be addressed. It must be talked about. It must be considered. Because it is one that is ripping the church apart. It is destroying people's faith. And they need help. They need help in how to work with this information. So we're going to talk about the recent sexual assault scandals that have been revealed about the Roman Catholic Church. Stay tuned. Well, welcome back, everyone, and I want to thank you all for tuning in to this edition of Vestiges of Christianity on Nicholean Radio via Spreaker. Of course, if you are not able to catch our show live, there are many ways to listen to us. Right now, we are currently on iTunes, we're on Google, we're on iHeartRadio, YouTube. You can listen to us directly from Nicholean.org, esotericcatholic.org. Lots of ways in which you can connect with this show and enjoy the information that we have to offer. Because honestly, there's not too many people that do what we do when it comes to discussing theology from a very pragmatic and slightly esoteric point of view. We tend to move beyond the conventional, and we're not afraid to consider things that exist outside of those boundaries. I think that's important for any religious seeker or spiritual seeker to consider. And hopefully this show helps to facilitate that for all of you. And, of course, if you like our show, please do not hesitate to send a donation our way if you wouldn't mind. It helps to keep the show on the air. Just make sure that you let us know that you're doing it for the show. And you can do that by going to esotericcatholic.org or Nicholean.org. And just clicking on the sidebar there, you'll see where it says donation. You can enter any amount you want. What we really need are monthly donations. So if you can afford to set up a monthly pledge, that would be fantastic. That allows us to do a lot more than just simply get by through month to month. But, your support's needed. We don't get anywhere near the support we need, which is going to come into a little bit about what we're going to talk about today regarding this subject. But before we do that, let's go ahead and see how my co-host Joy Keeling is doing. How are you doing today, Joy?
Oh, I'm doing all right.
Excellent, excellent. Good to hear. And I'm happy that you're here with us today to lend your insights into this topic as well. there's no reason to even go into any more detail than what is necessary in order to start us off. It's a bad topic. It's a horrible thing, and there's no skating around the issue. There's no sugarcoating it. It's nasty. It's ugly, but there is certainly skillful ways in which to deal with it. There's skillful ways in which to work through it, and I'm not seeing those skillful ways right now. So hopefully some of the information that I can give regarding this horrible situation that's occurring within the church today, hopefully I can help some of you out there who are now struggling with your faith over the betrayal of these clergymen who have committed this most horrendous of acts. And it is nothing short of horrendous. Now, I could have, as the bishop of this church, prepared a formal statement and sat here and read it off to you. I could have done that. But that's not my style and that's not my approach. And honestly, I much more prefer to speak directly to you in a conversational tone. So I don't do much preparation for this show. I do create notes so I don't lose my way. I can go off on tangents, as some of you who've listened to me for a long time know. I can sometimes suffer from the verbal diarrhea. So I apologize if I get long-winded from time to time. But I'd also like to, make sure that I cover everything that's important to cover. Now, like I said, I'm not going to provide a formal statement here, and for a couple reasons, and let's get into that. I kind of alluded to it at the introduction today, but I want to really make sure it's clear. First of all, I'm not going to sit here and defend the Roman Catholic Church and its actions. Okay, honestly, they would not come to our defense, and there's no obligation on our part to rush to theirs either. If we had done something or committed some horrible indiscretion in the Nicholean Catholic Church, I can guarantee you they would probably sit there and use that as fuel for their fire in hating us. So, again, what I say today is not at all a defense of the Roman Catholic position. However, I do see the Roman Catholic Church as our brothers. We are connected sacramentally as well as through, as well as apostolically through apostolic succession. And we do have great respect for the papal authority in matters of theology, particularly sacramental theology, and we do not violate anything that the Roman Catholic Church would mandate in terms of these high-level theological statements. Any of the places or ways in which the Nicholean Catholic Church disagrees with Rome or holds a different canon than Rome is really on trivial matters that are not important to the faith. But when it comes to the Catholic faith, the Roman Catholic Church and the Nicholean Church are one in terms of theology. And we yield to whatever the papacy says in regards to theology. But this issue that we're talking about today, the sex abuse scandals, are administrative issues. They're not theological issues. Certainly, the Roman Catholic Church has recently condemned, finally, what has happened, and issued a formal statement against it. And there was never any doubt for those of us who understand the spirit of the Roman Catholic Church that they did condemn it. This is not a systemic cover-up in the sense that they're trying to allow or facilitate an environment that is conducive to sexual abuse. Certainly that's not on anyone's formal agenda in terms of what the Catholic Church means or what its spirit is supposed to be. These things that are happening or have happened over the course of actually several decades, and incidentally, I should report, not really of any significance since 2002. So the reforms that have been put into place back in the early 2000s do appear to be working. I think that's worth noting. It's not something that you really hear anyone talking about, but it is something that is true. And so, sometimes I think when you turn on the news and you listen to the things that are being said, it makes it sound like there's this, this problem that's growing out of control, when really what it is now it's coming to light, something that's been going on for a very long time. And what I want to say about that is, first of all, these incidents, all of them that have been going on, this is not being done by true Roman Catholic priests. This is being done by two sorts: people that should have never become priests, and people that were too weak to become priests. Period. A person with a genuine vocation would never commit an act like this. A priest, when they are ordained to the priesthood in the Catholic faith, their hands are consecrated to God. To use those hands in a way that would violate that purpose, no genuine Roman Catholic priest would ever do that. Only a poser would do that. Only a person who was looking for some kind of easy way to get through life would do that. This is an assault on your religion. This is an assault on everything that you hold dear in your relationship to God. And too many of you are experiencing a shakeup of your very faith over it, questioning whether or not your church is genuine or sincere. And that's exactly what this is really all about. Because in the end, this assault is not just an assault on the victims, but it's assault on everyone, on the entire church. And remember, when I say church, I use capital C, and I'm not talking about just the Roman Catholic Church. I'm talking about the church, the people of God who are baptized into the faith. I'm talking about that church, not the building, not the administration, all of us. It's an assault on all of us. And it has to be stopped. It has to be stopped at its source. Because really what happened here, and I'm going to be completely blunt, I'm going to be completely honest about it. I'm not going to pull any punches. And you might not all like what I have to say about it. But I'm going to give you the best information that I can. And what I'm going to say about it is that this is an assault from Satan directly upon the very source of grace, of everything good and holy. And he's using every faculty of society to rip it apart. And guess what? We're doing a pretty damn good job of letting him. You want to know why? You want to know why? Let's talk about some of these issues. Okay. First of all, I used to be, as most of you know, a Roman Catholic seminarian back in the 90s. Okay. I felt my vocation relatively early in my life. But I ran from it, and I've talked a great deal about that in different episodes of this show, so there's no reason to get into all of that again. But I left seminary fairly quickly after entering it. And most of my training as a priest came through mentorship under a Roman Catholic pastor emeritus. Because I could not stomach the culture at the seminary that I attended, which was a culture that was conducive to letting weak people become priests. People that had no business entering into this state of life. And I know a lot of them who I attended seminary with did go on to become Catholic priests. And, well, there's nothing I can do about that. But I knew that there was no way that I would survive, or that my vocation would survive that environment, because it was so weak, and the people that were involved were so weak. And priesthood requires those with the utmost strength, because it is a constant fight. It's a constant battle. You are always at war against the evil one, externally and internally, which is true for all of us. But for a priest, it's multiplied by thousands of times over, because now you're responsible for people, and you're responsible for the church in every faculty that the church exists, which obviously includes the theological and the administrative aspects of it. Okay? So I could see already, and I was coming into it at the end, because, I mean, let's face it, most of these abuses occurred in the 40s, 50s, 60s to a certain extent. Not that they didn't happen even beyond that, they did, but the majority of these cases, it was far greater in those decades. So I was coming in to the church at the very, very end, before the 2002 reforms came in, and it seems to have certainly helped a great deal in ending this. But one of the things that I think our society is under the illusion of, particularly with those people who hate the Catholic Church and use this as fuel for their fire against it, is this archetype now that Roman Catholic priests are pedophiles. There is absolutely, I encounter this on a regular basis with the hate mail that I get. It's almost always brought up every time someone has something that if they have a beef with me about something. Even though I'm not even a Roman Catholic, I'm a Nicholean Catholic, and we have very different canons about this. In fact, I can tell you right now, those of you who have watched me on Travel Channel and have seen Sister Mary Joan, Sister Mary Joan and I am not exaggerating when I say this. I am not lying. I'm not trying to create some kind of special effect. If we had a clergyman in our church that we found out had committed an act like this, Sister Mary Joan and I would escort them to the police department at gunpoint. Both of us. There would be no hesitation. No, let's think about this and what should we do? None of it. It would be handled swiftly. And that priest would be defrocked publicly. Or whoever it is. Might not even be a priest. As a result, we are very small, so, things of this nature are unlikely to happen. Because even in the Roman Catholic Church, it's a very small percentage of clergy that have actually committed this act. You listen to the reports, and it makes you think that it's in every diocese, it's happening all the time, and it's not. Okay, it's the same phenomenon that we see when, when I was a kid back in the 70s and 80s. We were free. We'd spend all day outside, well past sundown, playing in the woods, running around the streets, walking all over.
I used to go exploring the creek all the time.
Yeah, it was free back then, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and
I just went wherever I wanted.
Yeah, and now kids are hardly even allowed to be anywhere by themselves. And if parents try to give them that kind of freedom, they can even, people will even sort of call in reports that there's neglect involved. It's ridiculous. And this came from the culture that everybody and their mother was a potential child molester who was driving around the town trying to look for victims. That's the scare tactics of the late 80s or mid to late 80s. And I remember it well because I remember having to go to these public service announcement type meetings in grammar school where they would teach us about the buddy system. And not that these things were bad per se, but what it did do is it created such a culture of fear that you started to question everybody and everyone's motives. And if somebody said, hey, I need help. If a teacher said, hey, I need help, can you help me bring these books back to my office? You stop to think, and is this a potential molester? And, a fifth grader shouldn't have to be thinking like that. But that's what came out of it. So, the risks that we have with disseminating information is that the responsibilities that the people who commit these acts have that they fail to live up to also exist on the other side of the fence. And so, if you followed me on Twitter, if you followed me on Facebook for the past several years, you know that one of my greatest, how can I put this? One of the greatest criticisms that I have about our society is the way our media system is run. And I want to make very clear that I am not on any particular major media outlet's side. I don't like Fox News any more than I like CNN. So it's not a political orientation issue for me. What is an issue for me is that they become social predators in exactly the same way that these priests have become predators of their victims. They are preying upon the victims to make money for their shareholders. And if you think that the news that you're getting isn't tailored to captivate your interest so that those revenues go up, then you're living in a dream world. And you're not getting good information. You might be getting information that has sort of the semblance of truth, but it's being spun in a way to provoke you. It's being spun in a way to destroy you. Let's look at some statistics back from the 1990s. In 1996, a Gallup survey showed that 95% of Americans actually believe in God. Now, that number's probably gone down a lot since 1996. But in 1996, that survey showed that 95% of Americans believe in God. Another poll showed that 9 out of 10 of us pray on a regular basis. That's actually pretty good. In 1994, a couple years earlier, the big 4 news outlets, ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN, filled some 18,000 news reports in that year. Of those 18,000 news reports, only 215, which is not hardly even 1%, dealt with religious institutions, movements, or ideas. Of the approximately 26,000 morning news segments that aired on these networks, 0.5%, just 151 morning news segments touched on the subject of religion. Then there was another study by a professor by the name of Robert Litcher. What he found is that he conducted a survey that dealt specifically with the national news media, and he found that 50% of journalists do not believe in God. This was also in the same 1994 to 1996 period of time. So we're looking at, keep in mind what this means, okay? You're looking at 95% of Americans believe in God, but 50% of journalists do not. 86% of journalists seldom attended religious services, and only 2% were practicing Catholics. 90% supported issues like abortion. 76% were strong advocates for homosexuality. Not that I'm saying that homosexuality is a evil thing. I think it's definitely something that is being demonized by the Christian movement, and that's for another show. We'll talk about that. But I want to mention this only because when you lump it in with abortion and then you throw homosexuality in there and then you throw in this last statistic that 54% disagree with the statement that adultery is wrong, it shows that our journalists, who are supposed to be the means of receiving objective and transparent information about the events that are going on in the world are horribly biased towards a particular point of view of secularism. So it's not, it's not really a conservative or liberal thing. It's not a Democrat or Republican thing. It's a religion versus secular thing. And this is being used now by the same dark forces that entered into these weak-minded priests who should have never been put in that position to begin with, should have never even been ordained to begin with. Okay? It's now entering into a stage 2. So now it's a divide and conquer strategy, because this is what the devil does, okay? And you're hearing it from an exorcist, okay? I work with this all the time. I deal with the devil every single day in ways that you could not possibly imagine. So if you don't believe me, you might as well not believe anybody, because this is my work, folks. Devil's entered into these people. It's penetrated into the church through these weak-minded bastards who stole the priesthood for their own malicious intent. Okay? And now, stage 2 is go into the mind of these weak-minded journalists who don't have any religious protection to begin with, don't even believe in God, and are being used as pawns to further the agenda. See? Look at these hypocrites. Do you want to be a part of a church that's this hypocritical? These are the people who are supposed to be protecting your children, and look at what they did. And that's a fact, people. That's a fact. They are using you. They are manipulating you, and they don't give a damn, because you know all they care about? Profits. Profit. That's all that matters. Shareholder value. I've said it on Twitter. I'll say it again right now in case you guys missed it. You want to fix the world's problems? You want to fix the divisiveness between liberals and conservatives? You want to fix it? Well, the Democrats and the Republicans, if they were smart, which they're not, but if they were, they would get together, work together as one unified front and make illegal for-profit news industry. You want the protections of freedom of press that that our American rights give you. You want that privilege. Then you would need to be required to give it freely, without any bias or agenda behind it. Just simply report the facts. I don't give a damn what your opinion is. Don't tell me what you believe. I could give a good flipping shit what you believe. Just give me the facts. When I turn on the news, I want to hear the facts. I do not want to hear what you think. I don't give a damn what you think. And that's all I hear now. You can't turn on CNN. You can't turn on MSN. You can't turn on CNBC. It's the only news outlet that I even remotely listen to. And even that one's gone to the dogs. You can't turn on Fox News. You can't turn on any of them without hearing people's opinions. To turn us against each other. To turn the church against itself. And we let them. We let them. That's unacceptable. It's as unacceptable as what's going on behind these closed doors with these reprehensible posers that call themselves priests. Molesting kids in confessionals, in hospitals. They should be more than defrocked. They should be, you want to burn them at the stake. Bring it back. I'll be the one to light the fire. That's what I think about it. That's how I feel about it. It's unacceptable behavior. It's unacceptable to let the devil work you like this. And don't let him win. Defend your church. Protect your church. By all means, let's clean out this trash. But don't let this shake your faith. You can't let the devil win. He will come at you from every angle. He will use your paradigms and your biases and your ideologies to confuse you and to manipulate you for his ultimate end, which is the secularization of our society, so that it can be completely unprotected. And then we will have a demonic slaughterhouse. We are all practically already there. I get asked more than any other question when I'm interviewed. I get asked, why do I find that there is an increase in demonic activity? And when I say that I have found that this is true, they ask me, why do I think it's true? And my answer is always the same. I will say that demonic activity ebbs and flows throughout history of the 2,000 years of the church. That's a fact too. But right now, the current situation is the result of secularization. And there's only one institution that's really pushing that. And that's your media. I'm not talking about television. I'm not talking about, various other networks and things of that nature. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the mainstream large media outlets. They have an agenda to change society to their own end. And that does not include in any way the preservation of people's faith. It simply does not. Now, you can look at these articles, and I know some of you have noticed that there is anytime anything like this happens, it's covered on every single news outlet, and it's always spun with the Vatican finally breaks its silence. Always to try to just throw another jab in there. And I don't disagree that they should have issued a very prompt statement. I do think they should have. So I'm not arguing that they shouldn't have done that. What I'm saying is, let's get rid of the emotionalism in reporting. How about we just report the facts, okay? I don't want to hear your intonations. I don't want exclamation points in my news reports. That's what editorials are for, and they do not belong in reporting. There's a separate category of news that's acceptable in. Notice how back when I was a kid, that was the last page of the newspaper. Now it's the whole damn thing. And they don't even call it editorial anymore. They just call it news. And then add to that the rest of social media with all of the fake news outlets that claim to be news and just report absolute, complete. It's like the National Enquirer. It's just all fabrication. I think actually National Enquirer probably gives you more truth than some of these social media outlets do now. You got to keep all of this in mind. You're being manipulated, okay? So if you're feeling your faith shaking up over the fact that some priests have betrayed our children, you should use that as holy anger. And it should make your faith stronger to protect the church from people like that. Why do you think I became a priest? Because I saw it. Not that I saw children getting molested, I didn't. But I saw the weakness in the people who were becoming priests and the strong proclivity to fall far from grace like this. And I even went to my own bishop and I reported this to him against my vocation director's instructions. I went to him and I told him what was going on. And it actually did ultimately result, although I don't know how much my influence was in this matter, but I do know that it did result in a complete shakeup of the administration of that seminary. Everybody was removed. But it also resulted in, a few years later, my own bishop, the one that I entered into seminary under, was also one of the first, if not, I think, the first, to come forward in the United States as having committed acts of child abuse when he was a young priest. And he resigned voluntarily and was sent off to I believe, a contemplative monastery. Did it shake my faith? Maybe it shook my foundation. I needed to figure out, what do I do with this vocation? How do I work with this information? If I leave the seminary, if I leave my vocation behind, how will I ever become a priest? Because I knew that I had something to do, but I didn't know how to do it. And I certainly didn't know how to do it with all these people that were around me. So what I did was the Nicholean Church found me. God found a way. And now here I am, fighting the darkness, doing what needs to be done. And I want to be a beacon of light to all of you. Okay? Understand a few things that the media is not going to tell you about this crisis. Number one, the Roman Catholic Church, and again, I'm not defending them. They wouldn't defend us. So, I have no obligation to defend them. But just out of fact, because I'm not going to teach you, I'm not going to share with you something that is anything less than truth here. Do with what the information which you will. But the fact of the matter is, while the Roman Catholic Church gets blamed for the cover-up, oh, these reprehensible bishops, the Vatican, the Pope, everyone, they were upset with everybody. They covered it up. Those bastards covered it up. Guess what? Every institution in the same time period that had this similar thing happen covered it up too. It was what you did. It was what was being taught by the authorities in the APA and various other outlets for reform, in the terms of how do you deal with a pedophile? Well, the idea back then was less about criminalization and far more about psychological reform. So the idea was, this is a person who's crying out for help, so help them. And unfortunately, what wasn't being considered is that there is no cure for pedophilia. I'm not even sure pedophilia is a disease. And the APA is questioning it as a disease as well. I think pedophilia is an orientation, and it just so happens to be an illegal one. This doesn't mean I'm giving it an endorsement. It doesn't mean that I think it's okay. I'm just simply being the facts of how human psychology works. We are fallen creatures with all sorts of flaws, and our sexualities are very complex things. And the things that turn certain people on are not the things that turn other people on. And it just so happens that this is something that has to be illegal because you're dealing with someone who cannot make their own decisions, which is a child, of course. So that's where the issue comes from. But you can't cure pedophilia any more than you could cure homosexuality. And people would be offended if you would even argue that homosexuality requires a cure. They'd be upset about that. And why? Because it's an orientation. And a valid one at that? Well, maybe so. But, the difference there is that, homosexuals are interested in, two mutual adults. What two mutual adults decide to do behind closed doors, that's their business. That's not mine. But when a child's involved, that's a different matter. So you can't cure it. That's the only point I'm trying to bring up here, by the way. You can't cure it because it's not. I don't think it's a disease that can be fixed. And when they were trying to cure homosexuality, because back in the DSM-3, which was the authority on diagnosing psychological illness in the before 1995, I could be wrong on that, but it was like I want to say early 90s and before.
I think it was 94.
94.
Because that was when they added Asperger's syndrome.
That sounds about right to me. Because the DSM, when I went into my first psychology class in 1996, it was it was the DSM-4, and by then homosexuality had been removed as a diagnosis. The other paraphilias, however, were still in there, but homosexuality was taken out. And in 3, it's there. And what that teaches us is that there was a time where we thought that it was a disease and that it could be cured. And this caused so much problem for these poor individuals who were having to deal with a society that looked at them this way, that a lot of them committed suicide. They developed complexes that they never got over. And it led to a lot of the in-the-closet stuff that is no healthier, I think, than having it all thrown in your face either. I mean, I think people's sexualities are generally should be kept subdued. I really do. I don't think it's anybody's business, and I don't think we really need to be advertising what we are or who we are. I think we just should be who we are and leave it at that. Let people be who they are. But we don't need to, I mean, I don't particularly care for when people making out on a bench. I don't care who they are. Get a room. So it is what it is. And so since you can't cure it, what do you do with it? Well, that's where the problem comes in. This is where it becomes a legal issue. And this is where we need to understand the dynamic at work. But understand that this whole long dramatic thing that I'm mentioning right now comes from the fact that back in the 40s, 50s, even the 60s, even into the 70s, and maybe even into the 80s, the idea was these people were sick, and they don't need to be criminalized. They need to be helped. And so the church would have, and it's hard for people today to understand this, but the church would have been condemned by the society of that time if they would have just cold and heartlessly held them at gunpoint and brought them to jail. They would have. So the condemnation of the way that we look at society, the way we look at the issue today through modern eyes, would have been completely different back in the people of the 30s and 40s. And so the church was acting, as did every other institution that had a problem, including school districts and various other agencies. They did the cover-up thing too, because it was about preserving the dignity of a sick person, even though today we could give a good damn. And I admit, I could give a good damn about these people's well-being. I'm going to be honest. Maybe let me use this as a confession. I mean, I'm a man too. I'm flawed. I might have to, cultivate holiness for my work. It's definitely expected of me as a bishop, as a successor to the apostles, as an exorcist. There's a certain amount of holiness that I must maintain. But here's my great sin. I could give a good damn about what happens to a pedophile that commits the act. I'm a little bit sorrowful for those who do suffer from this as an orientation, but would never commit the act, because I can't even imagine what that would be like. I don't know what that would be like. I can't wrap my head around it. I mean, I'm blessed to be a normal, functioning heterosexual. So I'm right there in the majority, and I don't have any of these complexes that people with with minority orientations suffer. And I know they suffer. Even today, homosexuals still suffer with this, because our society is still not quite there to the point that we can respect them, even if we might not spiritually or theologically or whatever agree with it. But with pedophilia, those that commit the act, I could give a good damn. I really could. Put them to death, I don't care. And maybe I should. Maybe that's the wrong thing. It's like, what would Jesus do in these moments? Well, I don't know what he would do, but I know what I would do, and I don't care. I'm sorry. But I also understand that we need to look at this issue through enlightened eyes, and we need to get over our own emotional biases about it and press forward and not let it affect us and damage our relationship to God. So, understand that sexual abuse is a human problem. Okay? And I'm not just talking about child sexual abuse. I'm talking about all types of abuse. You know what the number one this is a statistic that still holds true. We learned this when I was taking sociology. I minored in anthropology and sociology, majored in psychology. In sociology, back in the 90s, and I've looked at the statistics. I've even confirmed with some professionals in the field, and they agree with me. So it hasn't changed. The number one most likely person to commit an act of child sexual abuse is another family member. And then a very close second is a close associate or friend of the family. Not a priest, not a teacher, not a guy driving around in some, as some pervert in a car. Those are the stereotypes. Those are the vast minority. We're talking such a minority that your likelihood of being struck by lightning is greater than being attacked by somebody in those categories. But not when it comes to a family member. Not when it comes to a close friend or associate of the family. Okay, so don't let these stereotypes that the media likes to push into you to kind of, motivate you to see how horrible religion is, so that we move away from it. Look at the movie Zeitgeist, and enough said. There is a strong secular movement that is working. It's happening with the Church of Satan. Somebody tagged me in something that they put out about, the priests, of course, again, fueling the fire, taking the bait, mindless fools. But using it as, see what these Roman Catholic priests like, see what the Roman Catholic Church is like. They're molesting your children. That's what they're like. That's what they all are. And then they cover it up. Public school teachers accused of sex abuse were either transferred to another school district or to another department that also involved working with children. It actually has a term called passing the trash. That's how prolific this was. This is the public school system, folks. This is not the Roman Catholic Church. This happened in New York. They allowed them to continue to draw full salary, full benefits. Still had access to children. But nobody talks about that. This happened in Chicago as well. Why is this? Is it because teachers are evil? Is it because teachers, only get into the work so that they can have access to children? Is that why priests do it? No. It's a human problem. Humans do not handle their sexuality very well because we have socialized it into them. The taboos of human sexuality are so pervasive that they can't handle it. I know another report came out, there was another group saying, why these Roman Catholic priests, they keep molesting kids? It's because they're not allowed to get married. Well, explain to me then why the Orthodox and the Jewish rabbis have the same incident rate. But do we know that? Does the public know that? No, they don't. Because it doesn't fit the archetype. It doesn't fit the agenda. But you have to know this so that you can see that it's a human problem. And the evil is within us. That doesn't mean you're all going to be pedophiles, but the potential for sexual deviancy is in each and every one of us. How it would manifest, assuming we allow that monster to come out and be free, could be anyone's guess. It could be anyone's guess. But know that the evil is within you. That's original sin. That's what it did. If we want to get theological, which I do. This is Vestiges of Christianity after all. I try to get less theological on the other show. I want that one to be a little bit more entertaining. I want this one to be a little more educational. But I want everyone to understand that the Catholic Church didn't behave any differently than any other institution with this problem behaved. No differently. Okay, so they are no more the enemy than anyone else is the enemy. We are all the enemy in this case. We are all guilty in this case. Just some in different ways, some more than others. And in order to beat this thing, we got to go after the source. And from my vantage point, Disagree with me if you must. But from my vantage point, it is Satan himself trying to weaken the human race to a point that they become easy targets. Because if you don't have the grace of the church, there's not much even an exorcist like myself can do to help you. I have many, many clients. A great deal of them have never been baptized and have no interest in getting baptized. A great number of them have never been baptized and have no interest in ever being part of a church. And when I ask them and tell them that part of their healing requires coming to Mass, getting the sacraments, whatever it is that they need, coming and getting those sacraments, they don't want to hear it. They walk off and then they go and they tell everyone, see, that big famous exorcist can't even help me. Or won't even help me. Who knows what they say. But they don't want to tell. What they don't tell the public is that, oh, he told me that I needed to go to church and start receiving the sacraments, and I just don't feel like doing that. So guess what would happen if our entire society just fell away from the church? No longer had access to that grace. Talk about sending sheep to the slaughter. That's what will happen. That's what is happening. And guess what? It's not up to the Pope to fix it. It's not up to the cardinals. It's not up to the bishops or your pastor. It's not up to the Protestant churches or the evangelical churches or the fundamentalist churches or the charismatic churches. It's up to you. What are you going to do? Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you're still with us. It sounds like, for whatever reason, we lost our connection to both Skype and the Spreaker system. Maybe somebody didn't like my my broadcast. I don't know. But hopefully you guys are back and were able to reconnect. Or hopefully maybe didn't even lose the broadcast. It lost it from my end. And Joy was disconnected from the Skype connection, and then I was disconnected from both Skype and Spreaker. So I am back, and I want to say that it's been recording all this time, so I don't think anything was lost, and it should be in the archive there. But I also noticed that the chat room is not moving anymore. So if you can hear me, if anyone is still in the chat room, can you go ahead and send me a message so I can see that the chat room is still working? And we are at a position now where we can start taking questions and talking about some of what, we said. And I do want to apologize for my strong tone. but I am very passionate about the importance of the church and not letting the errors of man interfere with our relationships to God. Okay, Julie in the chat room says she's here. So, Julie, tell me, did you lose the broadcast at any point, or was it just my connection locally here? I'm curious to know. Just go ahead and mention that in the chat room if you wouldn't mind. And anyone else in the chat room, if you've got questions for us, now's the time. We'll spend the next half hour to an hour taking your questions. And in the meantime, Joy and I will sort of reflect on what we've discussed here so far. So, I know, Joy, you and I don't always agree on some of the forms and functions of the way society operates, and that's fine, and that's natural, and that's healthy, in fact, because, honestly, if we were all the same, not only would that create a very boring world, but, it would either spin itself out of control by going too fast, or it would slow down so much that it would never evolve, and neither one is a good thing. It's the balance that keeps it functioning. So the progressive thinkers help to move us along, and the traditional thinkers help to keep us in check. But from your vantage point, I want to give you an opportunity, to share, your thoughts and feelings on this scandal, and, more importantly, I think, what kind of advice can you give as a seminarian, as a person with a valid vocation to ministry? How, from your mindset, all right, everyone, welcome back, hopefully. I don't know what's going on with our connection, but we're clearly having some kind of live streaming issue. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but it kind of feels like it. But we're back. Joy, you're still with me, right?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I'm getting scared about that.
Yeah, I know. I could not hear you for the longest time. But hopefully now things are back in motion. Everyone's saying in the chat room that they can hear us again. I apologize. It's not my doing. I don't know what's going on out there. Yeah. But anyway, what I said, I don't know if you heard my question to you before it cut out again, but what I said is, you're a person who's a seminarian. You're a person who is also a person with a valid vocation to ministerial life.
Everybody has, evil in their church somewhere. I mean, I've heard story after story of people who said, well, this person basically ran me out of the church. Well, they shouldn't have been able to do that. That's your faith. Don't let someone else ruin your faith life. And one of the things that I heard yesterday, I went to Mass and the priest had just given an interview. I mean, I was walking up to Mass as the interview was ending, and the news organization left, and he went inside and put on his robes and got the Mass started. And he broke down in tears, openly weeping in the middle of blessing the the host and the wine, and it was just this emotional, moving moment, and we all understood, and we all were there with that, and we all felt that moment.
Yeah.
And what he said was that we need to forgive like Christ told us to forgive 77 times. And it's, just you keep repeating that forgiveness. And it's not about excusing what happened.
Right.
It's about finding peace in your heart so you can still reach out to God and have that connection, because that is what is keeping us all alive. And to abandon it because of something someone else did. It would be like if somebody came to my door and just told me, I think the bishop's a horrible person, and so I would not speak to you again ever. That's dumb. That you don't do that.
Yeah.
If you did something to me, then yeah. Or if you tell me to leave, then yeah. But, I'm not going to stop being your friend because somebody else did something wrong. So I'm not going to abandon God because somebody did something wrong.
That's, I think, really the most helpful thing that everyone that's out there could hear. I really think this is what they need to hear. Because, one of the things that I that really frustrates me about being a bishop of a small church like this is that sometimes people tend to treat it like it's my church and they're just visitors in it. So the administration, the clergy, they are members of the church just like you are. They have different roles, of course, but that doesn't make them any more the church than you are the church. So if a member of the church commits a horrible crime like child sexual abuse, that's the whole church's problem. And what I'm seeing right now is that the congregants are reserving the right to say, you know what? I don't need that dirty, rotten institution. I'm just going to leave. And why is that? Because they see the clergy as being the church, and they see themselves as a visitor in it. You don't have the option to leave the church. It's not an option that you get. You're a baptized Christian. You're part of the church, whether you like it or not. Whether you're going to be a practicing member or not, you're always going to be the church. You can't leave it. You can't. I mean, even by saying, you know what, I'm just not going to go, or I'm going to change denominations, or even religions, doesn't make you any less the church. Once you've received that baptism, you are the church. And to let somebody's misdeeds, however severe they were, and in this case, as severe as they come, dictate how your relationship to God goes from that point forward is weakness. It's a weak mind that would make that decision. And we're seeing it all throughout Europe. It's sad. It's not quite as bad here in the United States, but it is getting there. I love what you said there, Joy. And I think out of anything that I might have said today, perhaps what you said is even more important, because we cannot let the sins of others change our responsibilities to God. And it's not about the people. The church is not about the people who go to it. The church is not about the people who run it. The church is our relationship to Christ. And what are you going to let interfere with that? What could interfere with that? Christ isn't going to let anything like that interfere with you. It's He knows all of our sins. And if you think that somehow God comes out okay, regardless of the horrible things that we do to each other, well, then you're wrong. Because, well, yeah, he's going to be fine intrinsically. Our relationship to him is broken, and that's the thing that he cares about the most. He doesn't care about the kingdom of heaven. He doesn't care about the perfection of his reality. What he cares about is his love for us. And that he gave us the ability to break. He gave us the ability to refuse. And if we're going to let the evils of men dictate our relationship to Christ, well then, there's only one explanation for that. You're too weak. And you need to strengthen yourself. So I like what you said, Joy. Assuming you're still with me. Did I lose you again?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good. I just want to make sure. Anyway, I want to see what some people in the chat have been saying. Have you been able to connect with the chat and read it, Joy?
It's I tried earlier and just didn't
want to do it. I know it's something really, I don't know, something's wrong with the internet connections out there today, or maybe somebody's not liking this broadcast and they're sending what do they call those, DOS attacks? I think they're called DOS attacks. Could be.
Doxing?
Yeah. Yeah. It could be. I mean, like I said, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist about it, but it's kind of funny that, when I have a more neutral topic, I don't have problems, but when I have something that's emotionally provocative, all of a sudden, it starts cutting out. But right now we're live, and I'm connected to you, so that's good. So anybody out there in the chat room, if you've asked a question, we might have missed it. So go ahead and ask another one.
Here we go.
Oh, you made it in? Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, Julie, I think you're right. Julie says she thinks someone doesn't like the broadcast. I'm inclined to think so. Maybe I was a little bit too strong. Well, too bad. Toughen up. That's what this is all about. No more weak minds in the church. Come on. I mean, we're supposed to be sophisticated members of the body of Christ, made in the image of God the Father. I don't know how much more responsibility any being could be given than that. We do not have the luxury of acting like little spoiled brats. So let's toughen up. Let's accept the fact that, we've got some major issues to deal with, and we have a very strong force working against us in the form of what the church calls Satan. So that's what it's all about. It's about fighting the good fight. Why do you think St. Paul calls it the good fight? I mean, you'd think it was just about preaching? You think it was just about converting people? No. It's the constant struggle against the darkness, and the darkness is constantly working to stop you. And and if you let it, it will always be a few steps ahead of you, unless you learn how to be a few steps ahead of it. Personally, I prefer 10 steps ahead of the devil. But he always will try to get a leg up on you if you let him, and most people do let him. That's just the way that it is. No questions are coming in.
I haven't seen any. I scrolled through and haven't seen any.
Okay, well, that's fine. We don't need to take questions if you guys don't have any. And we might have lost a lot of our audience with all of the streaming issues, so that's very possible. It happens, unfortunately. Hopefully it won't happen again. But yes, Bruce, I can see your message. Do you have a question for us? Bruce in the chat room is asking if we can read this, so we're just checking to see if hopefully everything's working today. We'll continue to work. But if you have a question, Bruce, go ahead and ask it. We will be able to see it right now, at least. So far, I'm not quite sure. Hopefully they can hear me. Oh, boy. I apologize, guys, but this one's completely outside of my control. My equipment's working just fine. And my connection is just fine. I have not lost my connection to Facebook or anything. It's just been Spreaker and Skype. Those are the only ones that were giving me trouble. And I was getting reports from people in private messages that they were listening on the app and it was cutting out on them. So hopefully you guys will go back and listen to the archive, and hopefully the archive will be intact.
Yeah, let's hope the archive is working right.
Yeah.
The volume's okay.
Yeah, and because I really don't want to have to say all that again. Believe it or not,
And
I
I
do
probably will.
not like
So
controversy.
I avoid it as much as I can.
Yeah.
Which, considering I'm going to one of the most progressive seminaries in the country, maybe I picked the wrong school if I don't want controversy.
It's possible, but honestly, you can use that as a growth opportunity.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. I think in a lot of ways, this is an opportunity for you to enhance your skill. And so I never run away from any opportunity to grow, even if they sometimes are uncomfortable. So yeah, I mean, maybe you would have had a better time at a more conventional school, but
Well, a lot of them tend to be way too conservative for me, so it's hard to find that balance
in Christianity
where I fit in. Because of course, yeah, because of course it's pretty much you have the Christian left, and then you have the Bible thumping fundies on the other side, and those are really, when you're going to seminary, those are your options. If you're a woman, if you're a man, you can go to Catholic school.
Yeah, and honestly, the Catholic seminaries tend to be the more balanced ones. Honestly, when I was in seminary, our philosophy class was taught by a progressive feminist atheist, and the fact that and she and a female at that, and she was, to this day, even though I only took a few classes with her, because like I said, I was not very compatible with that seminary, and I did not stay very long. To this day, she's still in my top 3 favorite professors of all time. Yeah. I would not have given up that opportunity to learn from her for a second. And, obviously I'm not an atheist by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think, even though I don't necessarily have a problem with equal opportunities with women, I don't feel that I fit into the feminist camp as an ideology. I tend to feel that it masculinizes women too much, and it sort of in a lot of ways marginalizes elements of what we have traditionally associated with femininity, and reduces it down to where it's really not all that great. What you really want is what men have, and that's my biggest issue with it. Although not all forms of feminism. I grew up with it,
and that's not what I ever heard. So we were just looking for equal treatment. Like, I mean, one of the things that happened, I mean, the year I was born was when women first got the ability to get credit reports for themselves. So they were finally able to get mortgages for their homes and buy cars. I mean, anything that needed to be financed, you had to have a credit score, and if you didn't have a husband, you didn't have one.
Right. And
that's the kind of feminist stuff I grew up with. So it's just a matter of perspective. If I'm inside it, I'm going to have a different perspective than you would on the other side.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that feminism as a philosophy hasn't made improvements. What I'm talking mostly about is the radical feminism of today, which is not what you grew up with. There's a difference between the way the movement started and what it is slowly become. But I'm not a person for labels, and I don't like belonging to systems. I really don't. Even as a Catholic, it takes a lot of energy for me to identify myself that way, because yes, I practice Catholicism, but I am so much more than a Catholic. That's not my identity. That's just one of the things that I do, one of the things that I utilize, but I don't like using it as an identity. So I hesitate to fall into any of those categories, just because I don't feel that any of them really define me very well. And I mean, look at it. Look at how many Catholics get really angry at me. And the reason for that is that I don't fit their expectation, and they get offended that I am, I am a bishop, but yet I don't meet their expectation for what they think a bishop should be. Well, I'm sorry. I'm not on the planet to serve your personal individual concept. I'm here to service God in the capacity that He has given me. So, bishop is one of the things that I am. It's not all that I am. Sometimes people get upset. They get shocked. Somebody on Twitter just recently got very upset with me over. You might have seen it. It was quite a few days ago. But they couldn't believe that I was talking about Buddhism. And I said, look, I used to entertain trolls. I don't do it anymore. If you haven't followed me for a long time, if you're not following me now, and you come onto my Twitter and you just have something insulting to say, then you're going to get, I'll give you one chance, and then you're going to get blocked. Because you're not a follower and you're not really there for the right intent. But this guy was like that. He didn't follow me. I asked him, I said, well, man, why are you here? You don't like what I have to teach? Then why bother? There's other people to follow on Twitter. Go harass them. And furthermore, I said, he was actually arguing with something I said about Buddhism. I said, you're saying that I'm wrong. I said, what you're really saying is that Siddhartha is wrong. So why don't you go and take it up with the historical Buddha? Because he's the one that taught it first. I'm just relaying the information. He didn't like that too much. And then he was like, a Catholic bishop, that is talking about Buddhism? It's like, well, yeah.
Has he never heard of Thomas Merton?
I know, right? Oh,
I mean,
goodness.
come on.
I know. He probably hasn't. He probably hasn't. Of course, he wasn't a Catholic himself. I think he was a spiritualist.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So, yeah, Julie, I try to keep it real. Julie says she loves that about me. I keep it real. I try to keep it real.
Yeah.
I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to educate, and sometimes educating means that you lose friends. But more important to me is that you grow. So you can hate me, you can love me, you can do anything you want with the information I give, but the only thing that I care about is that you grow. And hopefully this show helps you to do that, whoever is out there listening. We've got quite a few thousands of listeners. So,
jeez.
Yeah, we got quite a few. Now, not so much the live shows, because the live shows are at odd times, and people tend to like to have the convenience of on-demand listening. So with podcasting in particular, the on-demand is the more popular outlet for them. But we have thousands of listeners, and right now I should report that, and I kind of expected this, Vestiges After Dark is getting twice the ratings of this show, Vestiges of Christianity. So I think part of that is because the topics are a little less religious and a little more maybe dark and fascinating, and that appeals to people, and that's fine. So, maybe going forward, I haven't fully decided how I'm going to do it, but I'm thinking maybe going forward, when we're finished with this particular season of Vestiges of Christianity, I might convert this show into just specials. And we might focus our attention mostly on Vestiges After Dark. If this is something that you like or you don't like, go ahead and let me know. I might even put a poll in on my Facebook, and you guys can vote in it and tell me what you like. If you want both shows to stay on the air like we're doing it every other week, or if you would prefer that it's just one show or the other, which show you like more, just tell me. And we'll go with it. But I want to keep Vestiges of Christianity at least available for at least specials, because there are some times where I need to talk about something that is purely a religious topic, and Vestiges After Dark is not really good for that to be the focus. Do you agree, Joy, on that? It's really not. Yeah. Leslie Mann says she likes both shows. I know Joe says if only people could see the connection religion has with Vestiges After Dark. Oh, I know.
Yeah, because it's not like we're leaving it out.
No, we're not leaving it out. And certainly even last week, I said I don't want to get too churchy, but I kind of have to with some of this stuff. Spiritual protection just lends itself to having
It really does. And of course, one of the reasons I like Vestiges After Dark so much is because I've been reading and researching this stuff since I was old enough to read. So I know that stuff very well. I'm still trying to learn esoteric Christianity, but I've got, a good more than a year under my belt now.
Yeah. And, and then you're in the webinar with esoteric mysticism. And you've got, I think, a good foundation. And I know a lot of my students in the webinar are the ones that really see the value in both of these shows, like yourself.
Yeah.
So we'll keep everything going status quo for now. But there's no question about it. I was looking at the ratings, and the ratings double. The listenership on Vestiges After Dark doubles over Vestiges of Christianity. It's probably because of the word Christianity. Like I said, there is definitely it's become a bit of a 4-letter word out there. And maybe I should write a book that says Christianity is not a 4-letter word. But a
lot of people have been hurt. A lot of people are scared. One of the reasons, before I ever heard of you, I kind of wanted to go into pastoral care for people experiencing, PTSD, not just from spiritual traumas like encountering, demonic entities, but also, people who have been in churches that brainwashed them, or churches where someone ran them out and had attacked their faith. Yeah. I wanted to talk to the people who have had their faith damaged by those churches. And so now, I'm really glad that I have the opportunity to speak to people who, a lot of them have been going through those struggles. Somehow their faith was attacked, and now they're coming back. And I think that's beautiful.
It is beautiful, and we see it here with the Nicholean Church. I'm not. I make it very clear. I'm not out there to steal parishioners from other churches. I'm not there to steal parishioners from Roman Catholic churches. I fully know that we will never, most likely, ever have a congregation that can support the mission church. It's just not the right environment for it, not the right motivation. We don't have the facilities to run a parish the correct way. We don't have the resources or the manpower. So, I fully understand that. But I will say that the majority of people that have become part of the Nicholean Catholic Church are people that were, for whatever reason, dissatisfied with the politics and fed up with it, whether it be, non-Catholic politics or Catholic politics. They don't want to deal with it either way, and people have been hurt. I remember some, it's a funny story. I'll tell, and then we'll leave it at that. But when I was a college student, undergrad, there was a class I took in anthropology that was talking about cultural relativism. Okay, and that's a big issue in anthropology that tends to sometimes conflict with conventional Christian ideas. One of the areas where cultural relativism becomes a problem is in missionary work. Whether or not we as a foreign culture have a right to go into a foreign culture and Christianize them. And of course, a lot of the more fundamentalist divisions of Christianity see no problem with this, but anthropologists don't like it. They feel that a culture should have the right to evolve on its own without being influenced by external sources. Kind of like almost Star Trek's Prime Directive.
Prime Directive.
Yeah, it's sort of like that. So I was, of course, in those days I was Buddhist. So, I didn't really feel any connection at that point to Christian ideology. And I was taking this class, and it was showing we were studying, and she was showing some documentary footage, the professor was, on this culture where I forget where, I want to say it was Madagascar. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me on this one. But I want to say it was Madagascar, this tribal culture, that in their tribe, twins are considered to be evil, a bad omen. So anytime anybody in the tribe has twins, that's usually a sign of bad things to come. So in their culture, the remedy for this is to take the children, the twins, out into the wilderness and leave them exposed to the elements to die. And, of course, everyone was appalled by this. And I came back and I said, when I raised my hand to give my 2 cents, which, of course, always usually lended itself to being a deep rabbit hole that gave me all sorts of personal grief in the end. I probably would be very quiet today compared to who I was back then. But I said, look, we can't judge this culture by our mores. That's just not an acceptable thing to do. And if this is what this culture has decided is acceptable, we need to be okay with that because it's not our culture. It's their culture. They have a right to make their own laws and their own rules. And see, in this culture, the laws were such that was okay. That wasn't murder. I didn't agree with it morally, but it was what this culture did. So I already had a bad taste in my mouth with the other students, and they didn't like me because they were all very conventional fundamentalist or evangelical Christians that I did not fit their paradigm. So, there was that. But what it ended up happening is we had another series of documentaries on a lesser one where a woman who was identified by, again, another kind of tribal area, identified by a Christian missionary group that had come in to clothe the tribal people, give them access to medical care, and, of course, religion, to convert them to the Christian faith. And in the course of this interaction, there were a series of deaths that occurred where some of the tribal people got sick and died. There was natural causes. It wasn't like anything was done to them. It just they got sick and died. But it was a large number, like 3 or 4 of them in a short period of time. And so the tribe was convinced that something was spiritually wrong. And the missionaries decided to blame this witch who lived on the edge of the tribal territory. They said, it's this witch that's causing this because you've got a follower of the devil in your midst. And yeah. And so guess what? The tribe went over there and apprehended her and imprisoned her.
Of course.
With the help of the missionaries. And so the professor said, what do we think about this? Now, I really don't remember what tribe that was or where this took place, but I do know. I mean, it was something that actually happened. And they wanted to know our opinions.
It's actually something that's really rampant in Africa and South America right now. Pentecostalism is sweeping through, and they're grabbing people that they think are witches and essentially torturing them to death.
Yes. And this was one of those cases. And so I spoke out very loudly about it. And I said, this, I'm sorry, is unacceptable. And the entire class was appalled that I was fighting against, that I was not defending this action. Of course they had to catch the witch, they said. Of course she was to blame for this. Who else was to blame? These Christians are trying to live their Christian life, and she's out there sending spells their way. This is the things that they said. I thought I was in a nut house. And so later and keep in mind, I went to Palm Beach Atlantic University, which is a non-denominational Christian private school. But, the idea here is that we're supposed to be non-denominational, which means that, and even people of other faiths. I mean, we had Jewish kids that went to that school, non-Christians that went to that school. So, the idea here was that we could get an education without being indoctrinated, but that's not what they did. Okay. And so this was something that occurred. So I'm leaving class and I'm going to another building to get to class. And while I'm there, I'm going into another building. You have to swipe your student ID to get into this particular building. And I get in there, and there's a group of about 4 or 5 of the students from that class. And they approached me and they said, I'm appalled that, do you really think that witch wasn't at fault? Do you really think that it wasn't okay for them to go and apprehend her? And I said, yeah, I really don't think that's okay. I said, that's a violation of their cultural system. And I said, nobody has any right to push that agenda on someone else. Well, guess what they did? They started raising their hands and performing an exorcism on me because they thought I had a demon, and that was a demon that was telling me to say those things to them. And they started touching me, and I said, get your hands off me or I will charge you with assault, because I was really pissed off at this point. Of course, that probably didn't help the situation because they probably thought, oh, yeah, he's definitely demonic because he doesn't want to be touched. But this is the kind of dark side of Christianity that exists that has hurt people. Okay, this is irrationalism. This is not our religion. This is not what Christianity teaches. Christianity is a remarkably rational religion. Bruce says in the chat room, what do I think of the Spanish Inquisition? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I know no one expected it.
What's that?
No one expected it.
No one expected it.
So
it's true. No one expected it. The Spanish Inquisition, gets a lot of, again, bad press. It's used, again, as a tool to show how awful and evil the Roman Catholic Church is or was. But, again, we have a tendency to judge our ancestors through modern eyes, and you cannot do that. You cannot do that. We change. Our society changes. And the society of even just 30 years ago is not the society of today. You cannot take values of today and judge a society from 30 years ago. You can't take values from today and judge a society from 500 years ago. Okay, so first you got to keep in mind that it was a different time, a more treacherous time. This was a time where, you could just travel from city to city and die because it was just that dangerous. But understand what was at the root of the Spanish Inquisition, okay? And really what it was is that Europe was constantly under threat of foreign invasion. After the fall of the Roman Empire and the barbarian invasion, there was just one after another, and the most prolific one was the Muslims. Islam was invading from both the south into what is now Spain, and also in the east, which is where we now is Turkey. In fact, Hagia Sophia, which was sort of like the Vatican of the Eastern Church, was converted into a mosque. It was then subsequently turned into a museum, but now they're turning it back into a mosque again. So Christians will not even be able to go and visit this ancient historical site because Muslims don't want them there. But that's another story. Fact of the matter is, the reason... What's that?
That's a shame, because I was really wanting to see the runic inscription, Halfdan was here.
Yeah.
Because the Vikings, did some graffiti while they were in the Hagia Sophia.
Yeah, that's right. So, this building is a relic of the Eastern Church because Turkey was a Christian nation. It was the seat of the Eastern Empire, and it was Christian. It was the seat of the Orthodox Church or the Eastern churches. It still is. Constantinople, the Church of Constantinople. I mean, that was where Turkey is. So understand that they were always being under invasion of Islam. Islam was a formidable force against Christian Europe. And there was a time where it was thought that eventually Europe would fall. So the Crusades were established to fight these foreign invasions. Now, again, the Crusades are another aspect of the church that people tend to cite to show how horrible and evil the Catholic Church is. But understand that if the Crusades had not happened, not only would we all be speaking Arabic today, but Christianity would have been lost as a relic of an ancient pagan type religion, because that's exactly how Islam really looks at it. I mean, it looks at our concepts of the Trinity as a type of almost polytheism.
Because they think that God is indivisible, but it's not a division. The Trinity isn't division. It's something else. It's something indefinable. It's a mystery of the church.
It's a mystery of the church, and it's very difficult to explain to somebody who's being fed their own propaganda. I mean, go to YouTube and look up Muslim refutations of the Holy Trinity, and you'll see what is being taught by Islam, or at least the mainstream, being taught about, how to challenge a Christian's perspective on some of the things that they believe. And it's really sad because, I mean, honestly, when you look at a Sufi, whom I love Sufis, they don't do that kind of stuff. It's really just, conventional Islam is very much like evangelical Christianity and pushing, their perspectives. But all be it as it may, we would be speaking Arabic today. We would all be Muslims because Europe would have fallen, and Christianity would be a short page in history, and that's it. It would be lost. But that was not God's will. It did not happen. And the Crusades was what helped to defend against that. Now, the Spanish Inquisition, fast forward another, 500 or more years. And now we are facing different types of threats, but under the same general concept. The unfortunate part is that a lot of people get thrown into that should have not have been thrown into that. Any enemy of the church, or whoever anybody said was an enemy of the church, could have been subject to the consequences of this Inquisition. So Jews were persecuted. It wasn't just invaders. It was people that were living peacefully within the empire, and then, of course, people that would have been following the more folk traditions of their ancestors and weren't perfect Christians, but, maybe practicing folk magic or something, would have been accused of being witches, and that was some of the unfortunate side effects. But understand that there were some studies that were done, and they found that nowhere near the numbers died in the Inquisition that a lot of history books claim. That's a fallacy. But it's just unfortunate that anybody could have died in any such a way at the hands of the church. But in those days, the church had a different role than it does today. Now it's purely just a spiritual guidance system. But in those days, it was a political power and authority. And, so it had mundane responsibilities as well as spiritual responsibilities. It had to manage both. So, this is why we have Vatican City, and Vatican City is still, to this day, an independent sovereign nation, because it's a vestige of what the church was in those times when the church was both a temporal as well as a spiritual authority and power. And as any temporal power has to have, you have to have a defense system to protect from people that would change your way of life from the outside. And so the Inquisition was a means to fight against that, albeit very poorly. But then again, show me any war in any capacity that has ever been 100% good. You won't find one. Doesn't matter if it's World War II, World War One, Korean War, Vietnam War. They all suck. Okay? War sucks. There's just no good way to do it. Even if you have the best of intentions, there's going to be unfortunate casualties. And again, the Inquisition cannot be judged. The message to take away from this is that the Inquisition cannot be judged by modern eyes. It has to be, you have to judge it by the time in which it took place. Today it would not be acceptable. At the time, it was a perfectly acceptable action that received a great deal of support by the majority, who ruled the Western world back then. It's just a fact. Hopefully that answers the question. Leslie Mann says, on a side note, did I see the movie Sliding Doors? He uses that Monty Python quote a lot. No, I haven't. I don't watch. Honestly, I don't really watch a whole lot of TV or movies, so I haven't seen that one. There's a few shows that I watch, but I'm these days I don't watch TV hardly at all. I pick up an occasional Ghost Adventures because I like seeing that show, and I know those guys, so it's fun to tune into them and see what they're up to. So when I have time, I do watch that show, and there's a few other shows that I watch, but most of the time,
I've never seen Sliding Doors either.
No, I haven't. Sorry.
But I don't watch a lot of movies. I mostly watch, if I watch anything, I watch documentaries.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was 10 years that I went without a television. And I finally got one in 2016. That was, I got rid of my last TV in 2006. And so 2016, I buy a new one. And honestly, I watch a bunch of documentary type stuff.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way, to be honest with you. I do have a few old series on DVD that I like to watch from time to time. I am a Seinfeld nut. I just get the humor of that show. So I find that there are people that either love Seinfeld or hate Seinfeld. There's very few in between. But I'm in the love camp. I enjoy that show. I get that humor. One thing that I think a lot of you will probably be very surprised by is that I do love the show that's on TV right now, Impractical Jokers. I really actually love that show because I was a horrible impractical joker in my childhood. I was relentless. I did things that were so horribly dangerous to get basically a laugh for myself at the expense of others, that I would go through great lengths. And I see growing up in New England, and of course Impractical Jokers takes place in New York, and there's a very similar kind of cultural thing between Rhode Island and New York as far as the way people are and the way people talk. And so I see a lot of my own, youthful mischievousness in them, and it's fun to watch. So that's a show that I definitely do get into from time to time as I guess a type of deviation from the stress of my work. And it is stressful. I mean, being an exorcist, I'm not going to lie to you, even though, I tend to be very matter of fact about it, and I don't really have a lot of spiritual consequences from it. There are like emotional and physical consequences. It's tiring work. It's exhausting work. You're around a lot of negativity all the time, and that does affect your brain function. I mean, it's not healthy to be involved in that all the time. And I am in it all the time. So it's sometimes fun to find a little deviation. So I'll pop in a, Seinfeld, or I even have Three's Company on DVD. I haven't even watched it yet, but that was a show that I remember from my childhood I used to like to watch, and a lot of physical comedy. John Ritter and it was such a stupid show, but it was a more simple time, and I like going back to that. I'm not a fan of our society today. I don't feel compatible with it anymore. I felt more compatible with society back in the 70s and 80s, but yeah, in the 90s something changed, and now I feel like I'm sort of living on a foreign planet. For all intents and purposes, I might as well be an alien. Honestly, it feels that isolating. But I'm not here to like it. I'm here to do work. I'm here to serve God and His will, and so that is what it is. But in my free time, I try to find little deviations like that. And yes, lots of documentaries, like Joy said. Lots of documentaries.
Yeah.
It's always an opportunity to educate. I did like back in about 10 years ago. It was like the Discovery Network's always had a really good show on the extra canonical scriptures. Or there was a period of time, and I was fortunate enough. I recorded a lot of them, so I kept them, and so I sometimes can pop those in and watch that when I'm looking for something a little bit more educating than some of the junk that's out there today.
Yeah, I'll search YouTube for old documentaries on things like extra canonical texts and women of the Bible and things like that. I search for that stuff because I really just don't care about being entertained so much.
Yeah.
So I don't watch a lot of regular television. I mean, yeah, Ghost Adventures. That's actually the reason I bought the TV, was so I could watch it when it was on. And then I just started watching like all the Travel Channel shows. I kept it on for about a month, I think. Oh. And then I started exploring the other networks and seeing all the other types of, shows similar to that. Like, yeah.
I like that. That's awesome. You bought a TV to watch Ghost Adventures. That's really awesome. I'll have to let Zach know next time I talk to him that you've got he's got some real dedicated fans out there. He probably already knows that though. But honestly, I was burnt on television with the show Lost. This, you guys might remember it. It made J.J. Abrams the big Hollywood honcho that he is today. It started out, the first two seasons were amazing. Absolutely brilliant, engaging. It would always end on a cliffhanger. Every episode ended on a cliffhanger, and you just couldn't wait. And I was fortunate because I didn't get into it right away. I tend to never watch new series when they come out, and it was family members who were watching it, and they kept saying, "Oh, Bryan, you got to see this. You got to see this. You'll love it." They know I get into weird stuff, and Lost was kind of weird. I mean, it had some strange things that would go on, and a lot of mystery behind it, and fans speculating as to what various things meant, and so that's way up my alley. And so when I started watching it in season 3, but I didn't watch season 3 first. My family had seasons 1 and 2 already on DVD, and they gave me those so I could get caught up for the third season. So I watched, and my wife and I binged watched those. We watched seasons 1 and 2 back to back in 2 days.
Oh wow!
Yeah, dedication. And that's just how good it was. I mean, it was a great show. So we binge watched 1 and 2, loved it. Watched season 3, loved it. And then we started going on to I'm not sure how many seasons they had. I think it was 5. I could be wrong on that. If there's some better fan out there than I am, let me know if I'm wrong. But I think it was 5 seasons. And, we were getting up to season 5, or the last season, whatever that was, and you could not find the direction that it was going. There was still so many mysteries, and we kept waiting for the big moment that was going to explain it all. And then it aired its last episode, and it made no damn sense, and it left all these things unsaid. And I was angry. I was like, come on. I've invested so many years of my life into this show, and this is how you repay me for that dedication and loyalty. And sure enough, J.J. Abrams, I saw a interview with him soon after the end of Lost, and he admitted that they were making the show up as they went along. They had no idea where it was going. And you know what? When you watch it in hindsight, you can tell.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And one of the things is he knew from the beginning of the first episode, before it even started, it would start with a close-up of that one guy's eye, and it would end the same way. Yeah. So he knew how it would end, but that's the only thing he knew about the ending. And yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I binge-watched the entire thing just in time for the last episode to air, and I watched that one live, and that was it. And then I was done.
And were you disappointed as much as I was?
I really was, because there was a lot of archetypal stuff mixed into the show, and they never addressed any of it, because I don't think they even really understood any of that themselves.
No, they were making it up all, it was all,
exactly.
I don't think they did. Yeah, like the smoke monster.
Yeah.
I mean, we know who it is, but we don't understand why he does that, or,
right.
Why was he terrorizing the island in that form when he could be a normal, intelligent, whatever he was. I mean,
yeah.
It was bizarre, and then like the big one that really bugged the hell out of me was the cabin, where you went in there and you saw a guy rocking in the chair, and this was supposed to be where it's been so long I don't even remember, but remember Locke was always looking for some kind of spiritual reality, and he went into the cabin and he saw it was like almost like a poltergeist where it was just going on. Everything was going crazy, and then there was this guy rocking in a chair, and it kind of looked like him a little bit.
Yeah.
That's never explained. Yeah. It's like, what was that all about? Why did we even see that? Was it just shock value? So right now I'm kind of very down on J.J. Abrams. I'm not happy that he took over Star Trek. I'm not happy he took over Star Wars. All of my favorite things, he's kind of, wrecking. And I honestly, I feel that the new Star Trek and to a certain extent even the new Star Wars are about as shallow as Lost. And, these were series that had great meaning and great value and great philosophical.
Totally.
Yeah, they're not what it was. I mean,
no. I haven't watched it since I watched the new reboot, the first one from, I think it was 2009, because it was right after my father died. And of course, Star Trek was how he and I connected. So I watched that, and I thought, man, he would have loved being here if he was still alive. He would have loved seeing this movie. And then I never watched it again. Yeah. And that's really weird, because that was something that meant so much to me in my life. And especially, I mean, Benedict Cumberbatch, I should have watched that.
Yeah.
But I just still can't bring myself to do it.
They are good movies. They're good action movies on their own. But they're not Star Trek as we know it. Yeah. They're not Star Trek. It lacks the depth. It lacks the what's familiar about Star Trek. And this new series, Discovery, I didn't even bother to even catch it. It's on CBS All Access. I'm not interested in paying money to see something that I'm probably going to hate anyway, and so I didn't even bother. But you know what? We're at the end of the show. So you guys, thank you so much. I did not expect the end of this episode to conclude with a little bit of fandom complaining. Oh my goodness! Oh, and Leslie and Julie said there was 6 seasons to Lost. So my God, 6 years of people's lives truly lost. That's what was lost. Your lives. They robbed them from you with that. And I never watched a new show again after that.
Yeah.
Joy, thank you.
Yes.
All of you, thank you so much. I appreciate every single thing that all of you do. In terms of listening to the show, supporting the show, even donating to the show to keep it on the air. Thank you. God bless you all. We will be back, Joy and I, next week on I think it's Saturday. No, I'm sorry, Friday. It's always Friday. Friday, the 24th. of August.
11 p.m. Eastern.
11 p.m. Eastern, that's right. And we'll be doing Vestiges After Dark. Stay tuned to find out what we'll be covering. I'm not sure yet. We'll find out. We'll see you then. Take care. God bless.